My name's Matt Wenning. I have a master's degree in sports biomechanics. I graduated with my undergrad from Ball State in 2003. My master's in 2005. A lot of my professors were world-class researchers, Dr. William Kramer, Dr. David Costel. So if you look up any cardiovascular or strength training books, you're going to start to see those names come up multiple times. Let's see. I have broken 3 all-time world records in powerlifting, 1,197 pound squat equipped, 865.5 pound raw squat with just sleeves, a bench press 611 in a full powerlifting meet. I have total 2204, which is the second highest total of all time in the 308 weight class. I won 3 collegiate national titles in the USAPL. I had 5 national records in the USAPL as a teenager and a junior. And I was one of the youngest guys to be in the top 5 in the USAPL Nationals in 2004. I was a member of Westside Barbell from 1999 to 2007. Trying to think of anything else. Tactical contractor for Ranger Regiment, 3rd Battalion, 82nd Airborne, Fort Bragg, 4th Infantry, Fort Carson, assessment director for Border Patrol at 2015 in Tucson sector. I have written online programming for SEAL Team 3, Israeli Special Forces, and that's all the stuff I can think of off the top of my head.
That is more than just a handful, man. That is a crap ton of stuff and a crap ton of accolades. So I am stoked to have you here, because somebody with that kind of background, there is, as I said to you before, a crap ton of stuff that you can get, information that you can give us. And so given the varied roles that you have, because you have over 6,000 guys that you are training, how do you program cardio that challenges all of these tactical operators appropriately, given that even though they're all tactical, there are many different areas and specialties within that group of people that you're training?
Well, I guess the answer would be kind of complex, because what I have found with most tactical contractors is their maximal strength is very weak. So it makes their cardiovascular systems have to work much, much harder, because if they're moving with 60 pounds of gear on, or carrying one of their fellow soldiers, or mostly in my field now, fire department, if they have their bottles on, their axes, and they're carrying people out of burning buildings, their maximal strength is so taxed to the point of percentages, 80, 90, 100+% of their strength, that their heart rate goes through the moon. The other thing that you have to remember in the fire service especially is that they're having issues with breathing because they're on a respirator. So the air exchange is pausing. Now, what that means is that it causes the heart rate to jump significantly in these masks. This can also be true if, somebody's in chemical warfare or any of these other types of factors. But what you find is that if you properly raise maximal strength, you can actually gain a cardio benefit because you turn things more submaximal. So my whole thought process is that cardiovascular training is awesome until you add resistance to the body, i.e., 60, 80 pounds of armor, you're carrying ammo, you're carrying weapons. You weigh, a good guy in the airborne in the 82nd, when we weighed them in full gear, when they jumped out of the planes, they were 100 pounds heavier than their body weight. Now you tell me what running in tennis shoes does for that. I can tell you absolutely zero. All it does is raise up injury rates, right? So what we try to do is gain anaerobic conditioning and maximal strength utilizing low rest intervals in resistance training, and then selecting cardiovascular training that is low impact. Now, obviously, when they go on the battlefield, they're going to have to be subjected to high impact movements, but that doesn't necessarily mean they should train exactly that way. So what we do is we put them in buoyant water and make them do sprints in water. We make them get really good on airdyne bikes. We make them get really good on things that are going to tax the cardiovascular system, but not cause mileage on the skeletal muscular system. And that's where I think the big problem becomes in guys. You get a guy up in the special forces ranks, that guy just in training may be worth anywhere from $1 to $3 million in how much money they put in him. And now you're going to use a subpar training system that's going to cause a ton of injuries. The big thing that people don't realize is that in the tactical community, if you look at the Army as a whole, we have a 33% non-deployable ratio.
Which is ridiculous.
Well, it's all because we train like idiots, right? We
Yeah.
think, well, I'm going to have to run in battle, so I need to run to train. That's the same thing as me saying, I squat with a straight bar and straight weight, so I need to train that way all the time. Yeah, try that for a while and tell me how your shoulders feel and how your back feels, because the problem that you have to find or figure out is how to get an impeccable strength and impeccable conditioning without mileage. Here's my thing, is if you want to train somebody to be tough, then recruit toughness. Don't make toughness.
Yes.
Because if you break people off in physicality because they're not tough enough, which is how they weed everybody out for all these different things. Look, if you're going to be Delta Force or you're going to be special operations, dude, I get it. You're going to have to weed out the weak. But our average military guys are getting into the military that probably don't have a prayer in doing anything special operations. They're not athletic enough. They're not smart enough. I'm not being an ass. All I'm saying is that why are you trying to break everyone? And then the big thing with our system, I don't know how it is in Canada, but when you get out of the military, you're the taxpayer's problem for the rest of their lives. Meaning the VA, if you got this guy that's a general or a colonel and all he believes in is beating people up and tearing them to pieces, and by the time they're 35, everybody that ever did any time under him will have knee replacements and hip problems and back problems. Who do you think's paying for that? Mm-hmm. Right? We got to start learning to train smarter.
Yes. Oh, no, for sure. I 100% agree. And it's hard to get, and even Pat said this, Pat McNamara, in my discussion with him, he was like, trying to get the young guys now to understand this. It's not about training harder. It's about training smarter. This is a question that I got after my conversation with Pat McNamara. And one of the things that he likes to say is that ass kicking lives in the transverse plane. Okay, so my question to you is, what are your thoughts on the importance of training in the transverse plane, and how do you incorporate that into your training?
I try to hit a lot of birds with one stone, so I don't necessarily focus on transverse training, but what I will say that as I do a lot of stability type work. So if you watch a lot of my stuff, we do a lot of bamboo bar squats. We do a lot of hanging kettlebell stuff. I find that's really big for transverse plane, and then also getting really good at sustaining long-term and weighted planks. I'm a big fan of Stu McGill and a lot of the stuff he uses for lower back. But I think the biggest problem with the transverse plane is honestly just learning how to brace. And you learn to do that with heavy weights, usually not the short and easy way. But, I don't know a lot of people that have a really weak transverse plane that squat 3 times body weight or deadlift 3 times body weight, right? So I find that the transverse plane is more about static strength than it is about anything else. So I find that utilizing oscillating or bouncing type resistance movements are amazing for developing that and learning to stay tight and create stiffness when needed. But I'm a huge fan of doing planks, side planks, front planks, moving arms and legs while you're doing it, and using a lot of bamboo bar in unstable environments. I'm also a huge fan of unilateral stuff, especially for athletes and soldiers, because you're only as strong as your weakest side. And you find that transverse type strength is usually, if it's deficient, is usually caused by a right or left side dominance or weakness.
Yes.
Maybe not all the time, but some of the time. Everybody wants some magic thing that they can do. And I'm like, if you can hold a plank with a 75-pound vest on and 1 foot up in the air for 2 minutes, your abs are probably pretty strong.
Exactly. So
I don't know if you have seen a new movement. I don't know if you've seen a new movement that I've been playing with, but I call it a Wenning plank. And basically I lean over with a big heavy band, and then I do small crunches from there in a lean position. It is the ultimate.
I haven't tried it yet, but I saw a video the other day of a guy doing it, saying it sucked, and I thought, okay, I got to try this. So next time I'm in the gym, I'm gonna do that. Okay.
Yeah, so it's a great ab exercise.
All right, so let's go. And the other things, you mentioned Stu McGill, and the thing about that is that you're not putting these huge flexion loads on your lumbar discs, right? Like that's
the whole point.
Exactly. It's amazing.
So how do you get stronger while reducing mileage? That should be everybody's thought process. How do I get better and reduce mileage? If you're not thinking that way, you're way behind. Because like I tell people all the time, there are all kinds of programs that I've seen that'll get people stronger, but there are very few programs that I've ever seen that get people stronger and keep mileage at a minimum.
Exactly. Exactly.
That's the goal.
Next question. You touched on this a little bit, but let's get more specific about it now. So as you mentioned, tactical operators are frequently carrying heavy loads, right? And you, as you were saying, you measured some and they're carrying up to 100 pounds or more of gear at a time. So how do you specifically prepare operators for this type of load that they are carrying in your programming?
Well, in my programming, it's kind of individual specific. So what I find is that the weakest link is what is the limiting factor, right? If we look at, like, if you pull up next to me and we both have big trucks and I'm stuck in the ditch and you hook a chain onto my bumper and I hook a chain onto your bumper, the thing that breaks is the weakest link, right? So if I have a link on the ends that hold 10,000 pounds, but the one in the middle holds 5, that chain link is only good for 5,000 pounds. Right? So in my opinion, the best way to get to where you can handle loads is to find the weakest link in the posterior chain and get it balanced with the others. So if I have a lumbar weakness issue, a glute activation issue, a hamstring to quadricep dominance issue over 60-something% that's going to cause a knee issue, or I have a posture problem, which if you read a lot of the old Soviet training manuals, a lot of them in the first few chapters tell you to fix all postural deficiencies before heavy loading can occur. And if the Army did that, they would save 75% of their fucking problem, right? You just have to fix postural deficiencies, and it's becoming harder and harder and harder to do because us as a population, as a society, we sit down, we don't do gym classes anymore, we're not physically active. So you can't attack that problem the same way you could in like 1965, where
Yes.
every kid played outside, every
Yes.
kid had physical capacity. Now we have zero capacity and zero posture, and then we're asked to fix this complex problem.
Mm-hmm. 2 points there that I want to touch on. Number one, you talked about the posterior chain, and it is so hard to get people to understand, like, everything that we do, our eyes are on the front of the head, right? So we pay attention to everything on the front, but we have posterior neglect, right? And so people got to work on the stuff on the back, and no, you don't necessarily see it, but that's the stuff that's going to keep you healthy. So number one, that I love that point. Number two, and you know, I'm a little bit older than you, but I do remember those days, man. When I was in grade school, we all, like, physical education was not this separate topic. It was not this separate course. It was this thing that everybody did every day. And when you look back to those Soviet films of the calisthenics that the whole class or the whole school was doing, we did that. And that was, in my opinion, that was a good thing. We were healthier, we were more active, more in shape. And now it's like, oh, you know, Billy doesn't want to do that. He can sit out. No, shut up. Get out of here. We shouldn't be. It's not to pick on people who are unathletic or anything like that. No, this is something, it may be uncomfortable for that person, but it's good for them. It is healthy for them. It also gives them, even if it's something that's difficult, it teaches them about working through things that are difficult, right?
Yeah,
So,
everybody's going to have different levels of adversity.
exactly.
So you know, we don't pick on kids that are, education deficient and can't learn math or science. We try to give them tutors and help them and make them better. We don't do that shit for physicality, and now we're going to pay for it because our entire medical system and society is falling apart at the seams with obesity and diabetics and stuff like that. Where's all the wellness coaches that should be hired for all these schools that are forcing these kids to get in better shape and eat healthier?
Mm-hmm.
Like, we try to fix everything educational based, but nothing physical based. And then our medical system is completely in shambles.
Yes. And the thing is, like, I see this all the time when patients come to see me, right? So my job as an orthopedic surgeon, I got to fix people when they get broke. But then I see these people and I say, you have no physical literacy, like none. You know what I mean? And the thing is, in my opinion, physical literacy or physical movement it is a language, just the same as you and I are speaking English. Somebody might be speaking Russian, whatever. It is a language. It happens to be a physical language. But if you do not understand or know the consonants, vowels, the words, the phrases, the sentences of that language, how the hell are you supposed to be able to do anything that is of a physical nature? When you are doing something that's of a physical nature, you are speaking a language, right? You are speaking the language of football. You are speaking the language of basketball. You are speaking the language of powerlifting. You are speaking a language. And if you do not have the simple words of that language, if you haven't mastered the simple words, how is it that you can speak anything that makes any kind of sense?
You can't.
You
You
can't.
can't. And I think where all that needs to be fixed is in grade school. I think if you want to give kids physical literacy, it needs to be done between the ages of 4 and 10. Right? The reason that the Russians beat our ass in your generation was because they were prepping athletes at 4 and 5 years old, maybe not teaching them the sport, but they were all involved in those calisthenic programs. And then they picked out the baddest dudes and the baddest girls out of those classes, and they taught them more. But the point was, is every individual person got a little bit of taste of that, so they developed some physical literacy, right? Instead of just having this, well, you know, people don't like this. You know what? I didn't like doing math when I was in school, but guess what? I was forced to do it.
Forced to do it. Forced to do it. Okay, let's move on to the next one. So you train tactical, well, you train many different tactical operators of all types. So you have the military tactical operators, but also you have first responder tactical operators. So my next question is, do you think that tactical training for first responders is different from that of tactical training for military personnel? And if so, why?
That's a good question. I think at the base root of your thought process, the answer is no. They're exactly the same. It's the difference in ability. But you'll find that the firemen that take their job very seriously physically could pass a lot of tests that the military has and vice versa. You find that there's very big similarities in each of those departments. So guys that want to be in special forces or want to be higher level military could come out and physically demolish any firefighter's test. But on the other end of the spectrum, I've seen some fire department guys that train for like their physical agility tests, you know, like the fire challenge workouts, that would be able to hang with some of those workouts in the military and vice versa. But I find the biggest problem on average is that what you're dealing with in the fire service and why the training has to have a slightly different perspective and distance of time is the fact that when you get on in a fire service, you have to be physically active for 25 years. So think about this. If I get on the job at 22, I can't retire until almost 50 years old. Whereas in the military, I only got to be in for 4 years and then maybe sign up for another 2 to 6. And that's way above average. But let's just say you might be in the military till if you're 30 years old in the military, you're an older military guy. But if now I'm talking in like, you know, like enlisted,
right?
Not officer. But if you look at a fire service guy, their career just started. So your training process even has to be more mileage based because you're responsible for them almost to 60, right? So your training, your thought process, your long-term ability to get them stronger without creating mileage is even more important as a fireman and less important in the military as far as the job is concerned because of the length of time in which they have to be active.
Okay. All right. So let's switch gears here a little bit and let's talk about specific types of training. Okay. So now let's talk about plyometrics. Okay. Do you think that plyometric training is something that is necessary for tactical operators? Okay. And also, so that's question number one. Question number two, is it necessary for the average person? And if so, what kind of techniques do you use to train plyometrics?
Well, first of all, I think plyometrics are like many other training modalities. They have to be earned. You know, a lot of times we put in plyometrics without the base strength, and then we don't have the base ligament, tendon, and bone density, and we cause more injuries than good. The next thing you have to think about with plyometrics is you want to do a lot of plyometrics, especially if you're looking long-term and reduction in mileage with maximum output and power, is jumping up to things but not down.
Yes.
Right? And that's where you have to be very careful to not create more injuries because depth jumping or jumping down with weighted resistance or trying to do depth jumps and things of that nature, you have to be very, very strong, and they have to be used very, very sparingly based on the fact of mileage. So I find that the key is being able to do plyometrics, but not necessarily train them all the time so that you're not getting the wear and tear. Now, once you get 2.25, 2.5 times body weight strong, it opens up a humongous library of different types of movements that might be more forceful because your bone, ligaments, and tendons are ready for those types of things. But I think we throw plyometrics in too soon, and I find that a lot of people that are very pro plyometric in their thought process tend to be very anti-maximal strength. They use plyometrics as their intensity because they're scared of lifting heavy. But what they find is that if you were smart enough, the heaviness allows the velocity and allows the impact. So impact can only be done safely if maximal strength occurs. You don't put a 1,000 horsepower engine in a car that's meant for 300 horsepower. You're going to rip the frame out. And that's what I think plyometrics are. There's sometimes they put a high horsepower engine in a car not built for it.
Yes.
So you need to be very careful with plyometrics, not overuse them. You know, a lot of the Polish and Eastern German plyometric and jumping books talk about using no more than 15 jumps per workout ever. But think about that. And most people that use plyometrics, 15 jumps is a warm-up.
Yeah, exactly.
So I am not a massive fan of plyometrics until the base level of strength has occurred and the base level of what you call is like physical education or literacy has been applied, because once you create velocity, the margin of error becomes so much more or less, however you want to look at it. Meaning if you have a little bit of knee valgus, right, when you squat, what do you think happens when you land in a jump? It's 10 times worse.
Yeah, exactly.
So my point is that don't be, if you're into plyometrics, I still salute anybody that wants to train hard, but be very careful in how fast you use them and the degree in which you use them in order to not increase mileage.
Well, so 2 points there that I want to touch on. Number, I see one of my trainers is on here and he says, yes, earn the different modalities. And I think that's very much true. And specifically the point that you mentioned, people don't understand that the metabolism of skeletal muscle and bone is on orders of magnitude faster than the metabolism of connective tissue, tendons, and ligaments. And so, yes, you have people that are strong as hell and they can do it, but their tendons and ligaments have not been appropriately conditioned. And if you think about the time that it takes, because the metabolism is so much slower, you have to put in a lot of time before you are able to do it, right?
Yeah. Well, you're a doctor, and you know this as much as I do, but ligaments and tendons and my thought process are always fed lymphatically. They don't necessarily have pure vessels to them that feed them, so they're a much slower adapting type of material than a lot of the other things around it, like muscles. That's why anabolic steroids and growth hormone and all these different factors are so dangerous, because they create a strong muscle, but they don't have time for the other shit to catch up, right?
Yes. So I think that's so amazing. And I like how I like the, basically the bar of entry that you put, which is 2.5 times body weight. Once you've achieved that, now you have earned the right to be able to use this modality. I like
exactly.
That.
Yep.
Okay. So here's a general question now. When you're dealing with a large number of personnel that you are training, because you train up to 6,000 guys there, how do you vary intensity, volume, and frequency, particularly when you have guys that are on all different types of schedules, right? Like they can't necessarily all do, you can't just say, oh, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, because they're all on rotating schedules. So how do you vary those things appropriately for those guys when you have this rotating schedule, different schedules?
So basically what I do military-wise is that the nice thing about the military is they don't have a choice. So if I come in and take it over, they have to do exactly what I tell them, barring nothing else gets in the way training-wise. So that helps tremendously. Second thing with the military is you're probably dealing with people at similar ages. So that kind of takes that factor away. Now, I think a harder position is going into the fire service, because now you're dealing with kids from 22, 24, all the way up to 55. How do you adjust for that? the trick is that the first thing I do is I come in and I teach technique, and I teach how to select proper modalities and how to detect weaknesses. So I educate. So the first thing I do is I create my own strength coaches. So if these guys know half of what I know, now I have other eyes in the gym helping. Then what I do is I conjoin the younger, fitter guys with possibly the older, weaker guys, or could be a mixture of either way. It could be young and weak or old and strong. And I create guys that are what I consider my second tier coaches, and I teach them more. Now, I have other guys responsible. So if my captains and my lieutenants and all my fire departments are more educated, then they're in charge of physical fitness for their guys. And now I'm the overseer versus the do-aller. Right? So over a course of maybe a year or two, I have an entire department. I got 15, 20 guys out of 50 that are my secondhand guys that are getting the workouts. They know more of the ins and outs. Now they are in charge of instilling those workouts when I'm not there. And then they are collecting data for me. And then I come in and I'm just giving new workouts. I'm updating whatever I've learned that week or whatever from a seminar or a talk or whatever, come in and instruct them. And now I have a whole set of coaches. So the guys that are ultra into what I do, I turn into my coaches, and now they get higher level knowledge and they pass it down to their guys. And now when I walk in, I'm walking into a situation where I have 15 or 20 personal trainers out of 50 guys. Now I fix the problem. And now I can make everything individual, because I can have one guy in charge of these guys, one guy in charge of these guys, right? And we can still create that team atmosphere. And then the other way I correct it is I never try to train in the firehouse more than 5 to 7 guys at a time. Then that way I can keep my eyes on almost all of them and give them individual coaching without me feeling like I got 50 guys in at one time. The reason that we also have to do that is because if I have those 5, 7 guys in with me, then the rest of the department can be covered while I train these guys and they don't get disturbed. So if a big run happens, or they may be a small run, they're all covered, and then I can keep them fixed. And then when I'm done with them, they'll go relieve the other guys. So they're always getting covered, so we never have to worry about them leaving or going on a long run and I don't get to train them or come back. So it actually works out pretty well.
Okay, cool. Now, and it kind of speaks a little bit to my next question, because my next one was, how do you get buy-in from unmotivated members of the group when you're programming for large group? And let me just say as an aside, I find it strange that I have to ask you this question, because when you think about tactical groups, you think, oh my God, these are type A personalities. They were motivated to get in here. So it's like, you wouldn't think that they would be unmotivated when you give them programs to do. But there are still some dudes, or some, whoever, men, women, whatever, that they are just not buying it, whether it's not, they don't agree with what you're programming, they just want to do their own shit or whatever. But how do you get buy-in from these people?
Well, it takes time. That's the one thing, is you got to be patient. Okay. That, I would say, that stands at the top. The next thing you do is you figure out what makes people tick. So when I first came into the fire service, I came out of special forces. So I had that mentality that we just talked about. These guys are all firemen. They all want to be badasses. They all want to be ass kickers. And I get there and I'm like, this isn't the case at all. These guys want to slack. They don't want to do anything hard. They want to coast through work. They want to collect a paycheck. And, and then after time, I started to realize that wasn't the case either. Some of them are overworked. Some of them have small kids at home. I don't know this. I'm just a meathead. So I show up and I'm just like, what's wrong with all these dudes? What I started figuring out was I need to learn how to make them tick. So how do you do this? You start asking them questions about, what do you like to do outside of the firehouse? What do you like to do when you start figuring out they want to be physically active? You don't sell it as, I'm going to make you better at your job. You sell it as, I'm going to make it better at your life. So when you get off work, you're going to be able to go have more fun. You're going to have less pain and injury. You're going to be able to go play with your grandkids. You're not going to have to be worried about being in and out of, the hospitals and get your toes cut off for diabetes and all these other things. So I started attacking it from a personal standpoint versus this is your insurance premium that you're going to put a couple hours a week into so that you don't have to pay for it when you retire. Because I look at them and I say this, what is all of this fucking retirement money going to do when you can't leave the house no more? See, now when you start coming to that mentality, Now they're
Yeah.
like, maybe this guy's not just trying to be, he's not just bought in from the township for us to be better firemen. He actually cares about us as a person. Now you got a completely different buy-in. You got a completely different set of eyes on you, and now you sneak them into getting to be better athletes.
Yes, I like that. You motivate them on the down low. Now, here's a question. Again, one of my trainers had posted this one up. What are your thoughts about challenges in platoon challenges?
In platoon challenges,
Mm-hmm.
it depends on how smart the challenge is, right? I mean, like, I'm all about competition, but I think what you have to realize is that, especially in this new generation, we're talking platoon, so we're talking enlisted. So we're talking guys between probably 18 to 25. We both know that the attitude from your generation to my generation to that generation is way different.
Different.
So you got to be careful about in platoon competition, because you almost have to keep everything individualistic until you build a base. Build confidence before you take the weakest guy and show him he's the weakest guy. Right? You know,
Yeah.
fatten your soldier up before you take him to war and get shot at. Don't send a guy emaciated with both of his eyeballs cut out.
Yeah.
He's just
Yeah.
an Operation Human Shield, right? So in my opinion, I like to build up confidence, get the guys strong, get the guys confident, get the guys feeling like they can walk through a brick wall, and then compete, right? But the problem is that all the shit we're talking about is more of a long-term thought process than just taking somebody in and breaking them off.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? I don't think that helps any egos other than the guys that are already good. Like, if a guy's already physically proud, he's already super badass, and you take him into a situation like a platoon competition and he stomps the shit out of everybody, all you did was make the best soldier feel better and the worst soldier feel worse. In my opinion, I don't think that's the best way to create the all-around best team of soldiers. Now, if you're using that as a selection process to get the baddest dudes on your team, I get it. But if you're saying this is the platoon I have and this is what I'm stuck with, you got to figure out a way to make them work as a team and not make the badasses feel like badasses and the weak guys feel bad. You know what I mean? Or feel worse.
I like that, man. I think that's very intelligent thinking. Okay, so you mentioned talking about baselines a little bit. So let me ask you, tactical operators. Let's go tactical military. What are your baseline standards for these guys?
You want to know in a perfect world, or you want to know like perfect world?
Perfect world.
Okay, perfect world. All the guys weigh about 185, 185 to 190, because I find that weight, depending on height, that weight is, you can be pretty strong and still have a massive cardio base. Step one. Step two, that 185-pound guy needs to be able to squat 400 plus.
Okay.
He needs to be able to deadlift 455 plus.
Woo!
Needs to be able to bench at least 275, if not 300.
Okay. That's one rep max.
One rep. All that's one rep.
Okay. Yeah.
And I'll tell you why in a second. And then they need to be able to run under a 16-minute 3-mile.
Okay.
And I've seen guys be able to do that. Now, these are the most freakish of the freak, but I've seen the guys in Ranger Regiment be able to do that, especially sniper divisions.
Yeah.
Maybe even 17 would be decent. But another test that I think is really good is a 35-pound kettlebell swing for 10 minutes straight.
Woo! Dude,
now, I have 10 firemen over 55 years old that can do that.
Really?
Yeah.
Holy mackerel. Now, so 10 minutes straight, are they able to rest as required in there? It's just 10 minutes.
Straight to the eye, 10 minutes, no rest.
Giddy up. Holy mackerel.
And the reason I like that test is because it's hard on the air, it's hard on the muscles, it's hard on the mind, and it's zero impact.
Yes. 10 minutes.
And it labors your breathing like you're in full equipment or respirators.
Yes. Oh my God.
And if you do the math, 35 pounds dropping at 9.81 meters per second in a swing comes out to almost double 60 pounds. What does the average soldier wear in gear?
60 pounds.
There you go.
Jeez, man. Now, you've given me another one to try. Holy crap. And I can just say for, just as an aside, I've done like 2 minutes straight of kettlebell, and even 2 minutes straight, like using a 24 kilo bell or 53-pound bell, 22 minutes was not fun. So
yeah, 53 is a whole nother game show. 53, I would say five minutes would be insane. Like
yeah,
it's totally doable, but it would definitely be harder.
yes,
That would be your heavier, stronger guy, maybe your mechanical, like your mechanized dudes
yeah,
that can lift more and don't have to run as much. I would say the 53 bell would be better. But I have a 105-pound kettlebell, and I've swung it for 3 minutes. And I did that when I weighed 303.
yeah.
So
Jeez.
do the math.
All right.
But here's, let me get back to my point of why I say those strength numbers. The
Okay.
reason that I could swing a 105-pound kettlebell for that long is because I can deadlift 850 pounds.
Okay.
So when I pick up a 100-pound kettlebell, it's no big deal.
Mm-hmm.
So my point is that when maximal strength is developed correctly,
Yeah.
and keep in mind, bear with me, in a conjugate thought process where you're using multiple means in order to get that strong, everything you touch is submaximal.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So what's the strain?
Mm-hmm.
Right? But if you're weak and you grab something that's heavy, you're already in a strain, you're already mentally defeated.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
So
I love that thought process, man. You know, because we have so many people that go like, why do I need to get jacked? I don't need to do resistance training. I'm just going to do cardio. But like, I love what you're saying. It's like when you are strong, you pick these things up. You're not laboring yourself. It's not hard, and you can use it as appropriate for cardio.
Well, here, think about it in this perspective. You take a guy that all he does is cardio. You put him in a bed for 2 weeks and don't let him move. He's going to get up and 50% of that shit's gone. You get a dude super strong and let him lay around for 14 days and get up and knock the rust off. He's only going to lose 10 to 15%. Why would you work on something that disappears so fast?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right? Super
For
strong
sure.
lasts because it's muscular and neurological.
Yep.
Running and cardio, if it's done in a cyclic fashion, you're getting so efficient at the movement that your body's not ever getting any better, right? That's why I'm thinking if you really want cardio, you need to have 6 or 8 different variations of movements that force your body to not master a movement, but actually just get in better shape.
Yes.
There's no exercise in resistance that you can give me that I'm not going to be good at because I train that way.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So what's transferable, right? Versus I'd rather have a guy, if he's a good cardio guy, I want a guy that can swim pretty far, run pretty far, swing a kettlebell pretty far, do a rower pretty far, do a bike really far. If he can do all those and keep a high tension on that or a high heart rate and not die out, that dude is going to be a badass in almost any situation. But a guy that's only good at one thing, which you find a lot with cardio guys, they have that one cardio thing they like. They're a runner or they're a biker or they're a swimmer. But you get them out of their environment, they don't have any cardio.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, it's when it makes me go back to what I was saying before about how physical literacy is a language. So when you take this guy and you give him multiple different modalities, and he does cardio and all these different modalities, strength trains and all these different modalities, his selection, his vocabulary is larger, right?
Well, not only that, but his mileage is less because he's different in all different movements. So what mileage, in my opinion, mileage is incurred when the same movement is moved too often, too high a volume, too high of an intensity.
Mm-hmm.
Right? If we can rotate that around, then we can gain actually more generalized abilities without specific mileage, and that is the point of training.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Okay, now, man, you are dropping so many knowledge bombs. This is amazing. Thank you very much. I'm going to jump to my end because I want to make sure that I get this in, and I don't know that I'm going to get through all my questions. So the next question is, and you mentioned it briefly, but I want you to talk specifically about this now. So what is the philosophy behind conjugate periodization training? Why is it useful? And who is it most appropriate for?
Okay. Let me see if I can remember all these points. So conjugate training is a mixture of different types of modes and means in order to elicit a specific result. So if I want to be a great powerlifter, let's just say a great squatter, then I would use free squats, box squats, chain squats, band squats, different kinds of bars and stances. Now, in an educated fashion, if I put those in the right order based on my weaknesses, then I should theoretically be able to get way stronger because my body can't master the actual movement. It only has to master itself, right? The next thing is conjugate also develops with different types of straining abilities and energy systems. So if I have dynamic efforts, which are speed, and I have max effort methods, which are straining, and I have repetition efforts, which are more submaximal until failure or tiredness, fatigue, then I'm not really missing any one particular type of contractile ability, therefore leaving me no weaknesses. Now, the next thing that conjugate is good for, is my opinion, is everyone, because the whole point the Soviets understood and figured out conjugate system was to make Olympic athletes last longer, right? If it costs, say, Vasily Alexiev, it cost, let's say, the Russians $10 million to get him that good in 1975. They wanted to keep him that good until the 80s, because then they don't have to waste more money getting guys to come up every Olympics when they can just keep a top guy there and run him through the gauntlet and they don't get hurt. That's when they abandoned the Bulgarian system, where it's using the same exercises over and over and over again just to kind of weed people out due to physical toughness and just genetic prowess. So I think that style of system is good for everyone, but there are some setbacks. The setbacks are you have to be very, very smart to use it because it's based on your structural weak points. 1. 2, you have to have more types of equipment than the average person is ever going to have in their gym, meaning you got to have different kinds of modes. You got to have safety bars, cambered bars, straight bars, all these different modes and modalities. But the problem is that we have to ask ourselves, are we trying to become a Corvette and we're only a regular car? And if you're going to work on specialized stuff, or you're going to be, specifically good physically, you may need more stimuluses than just the basic gym. You might need, stuff that's based on your weaknesses, glute ham raises, belt squats, good morning machines, things that put you in types of movements that just can't be replicated in the real world, right? So the point is that I like conjugate for everyone, because if it's done correctly like I do it, it's based on mileage and weaknesses and posture. Those are the 3 things that decide everything that I do around my workout. Therefore, I haven't seen other workouts that take all of those things into consideration. I'm sure that, like anything else, there's probably a better way than you practicing medicine. There's a better way than me lifting weights, but I personally have never seen it. So until somebody comes to me and goes, I found a program that makes no mileage, gets me super strong, makes me insanely fit, and ignores no energy system or muscle fiber typing, now you have my attention. But until then, I don't see people talking about that. So I'm not too interested in what everybody else has to say with training, because you have to have all of those chair stools in order for the thing to stand. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Okay. Now here's something, because you mentioned, you just touched on this in your answer there. So you're a proponent of the belt squat, and you use that in your training. Can you explain the advantages of using that, and what is your personal interest in using this squatting apparatus? Although I think you mentioned a little bit there.
Yeah, the belt squat, what I like about the belt squat is I can get a lot of volume in squatting without the adversarial spinal compression. That's number 1. Number 2, we know that volume is the key changer in what we can do in not only muscle mass, but ligament and tendon density. I find that using highly compressive movements for more volume eventually creates a short shelf life. So if I can figure out a way to be in a traction-based environment with more volume, it's a win-win situation. Now, the problem is that a lot of these machines that have been designed in the past never took the proper squat ratio into mind, meaning that when I designed the machine that I make, I designed it to have a 1-to-1 ratio. So if you use my machine with no hands, it's very, very close to the real squat. So when I squatted 865 and a half in sleeves, which was the all-time world record, I did 825 for a triple on my machine. It was damn close. So the point is you need a machine that can also build strength and test strength without putting you into spinal compression. So that's why I like it. It's kind of a trick in order for the body to be able to get stronger without increasing mileage.
Now,
go ahead. No, I'm good.
Okay, so it's interesting that, if you think about somebody like Ronnie Coleman, okay, and the dude has had like 10 or 11 back surgeries, he can barely walk, and you think, well, geez, maybe if he had used a belt squat machine, he could have been huge and strong as hell,
Think
but
about this
not have that
perspective.
mileage on his back.
Compared to me, Ronnie Coleman was not strong.
Mm-hmm.
Why is he all screwed up and I'm not? Because
Mm-hmm.
by the time he was my age, he already had big problems.
Yeah.
So here's my point. My point is that if you look at Ronnie Coleman's training, I can guarantee you if I went back and looked at his training logs, he trained the exact same way for years. He had
Mm-hmm.
certain exercises he liked to do. He did them until he ran them into the ground and beat his body to pieces. And nobody was around him saying, hey, there's probably a better way you can figure out how to build all this muscle tissue without the spinal compression, without the knees getting beat up. There's always a way. The problem is, are you willing to sit down and think smarter versus try to train harder, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
The other factor that bodybuilders have a huge disadvantage now, an advantage on stage, disadvantage in real life, is that bodybuilders tend to have a ton of muscle tissue with very small joints.
Yes.
So if you look at Ronnie Coleman, even though he had a bigger middle section, his waist was fairly small for his size, and his knees weren't very big, and his elbows and shoulders joints themselves probably weren't very big. So my point is, if you were to emaciate him and get him down to, say like concentration camp weight, he's not going to stand out as a skeleton, right? He stands out because of his muscle tissue. So they tend to have smaller joints that are more susceptible to injuries with heavy weights, as we know, with
Yep.
large muscle bellies.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, so let's move on and let's talk about the average person, not someone who's bodybuilder, strength
Yeah.
trainer, but let's talk about the average person now. So, what are your core principles for training? So, yes, you work with a lot of tactical and first responder tactical groups, but if you're just training the average person, they want to hit everything. They want to get big, fast, strong. They want to be mobile. They want to have good longevity. What are your core principles for training?
Well, the first thing is, like we talked about, is always be focusing on postural deficiencies and correcting those. I think once you get to that point, that's going to basically everything falls under that umbrella, right? We got to have good subscapular muscles. We got to have strong rhomboids, lower traps. We got to have activated and highly hypertrophied rear delts for anterior shoulder rotation. We have to have conditioned, flexible, and mobile lower backs, right? Which is going to be a lot of reverse hypers. We have to have functioning and very strong glutes. And this is talking everyone. You could be tactical, general pop. This doesn't matter. You have to have a balance of quadricep to hamstring ratio above 65, 70%. That's been shown in literature for years, but nobody ever talks about it. And that means, I think, in my opinion, based on the patella and its leverages, you need to train your hamstrings twice as much volume as your quadriceps.
Mm-hmm.
And that's minimum, right? The next thing, what we talked about earlier, is train your core to be statically strong, not flexion extension strong, right? Especially the front abdominals and transverse. You need, if you do pressing movements, you need to be tricep dominant in those movements. So you have to get your triceps super strong so that the body mentally, as a potentiation point or motor pattern, goes to the tricep in maximal strain. If I'm a tricep dominant presser, chances of me hurting my shoulder are very slim. And I'm talking pressing as in incline, decline, flat, or military. If I have a very strong tricep, the chances of my shoulder being hurt are slim to none.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, like we talked about earlier, if you're focusing on everything on the posterior chain twice as hard as you are on the front, you're already training smarter than 90% of the population.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So we're got about 5 minutes left now.
Sure.
So we're going to ask the last one before I give you a minute or two to freewheel. So my last question is, do you take any of your influences for what you are now training people with or coaching people with from any of the other, well-known strength and conditioning coaches? And how do you think that the principles of those other coaches, whoever they may be, I'll let you tell me, how do you think they compare to your own personal Matt Wenning philosophy? Because obviously you have come up with your own philosophy of training.
Sure. Well, I think Charles Poliquin was a huge influence. The dude was talking spaceship language to me when I was in college, and I didn't know him. And then 6 or 8 years ago, he gets a hold of me and asks me if he can come to one of my seminars. And I'm like, yeah, dude, come on. So he came onto my seminar. We became a really good friends, and then we did seminars together over in Europe. And that time with him was an eye-opening experience of, I don't know near as much as I think I know, right? But instead of being negative about it, I just opened my mind to what he was saying. And what I noticed was we shared this relationship where he wanted to know what I knew and I wanted to know what he knew. So I had something to trade, right? He had come from a bodybuilding background in sports athletics, but he had never seen somebody with the strength level that I had and experimented with. I remember clean as day, this was probably 2015. I do a seminar in Colorado, and he was living in Monument, which is right below Denver. And he come down to the seminar, and I was talking about speed work. And I said, I can move 185 pounds with 100 pounds of band tension and 120 pounds of chain at over 1 meter per second. And he told me I was full of shit. So we hooked up the machine that he had, and it was 1.13. And at that time, he never looked at me as a person beneath him. He looked at me as an equal, because he knew I wasn't feeding him shit. He had never seen anything like that before, not at that velocity. He figured that was going to come back at 0.6 or 0.7, and it came above what I told him. It was 1.1 something. And long story short is after that, we became really good friends and traded a lot of information. He let me come to his seminars. He let me go to his seminars. I let him come to mine, and we became really tight. And he opened my mind up to a lot of nutritional things, a lot of inflammation things, a lot of long-term training and nutrition stuff that I'd never seen, and books he had I'd never seen before. So that was big. And then where I came from school, Dr. Kramer used to work with Vladimir Zasiorski at Penn State. So I had immediate access to the Central Institute of Physical Culture Moscow's leading professor all through my college and graduate and world record breaking things. So if I had something to talk about, I could email Zasiorski, which is considered the godfather of strength training, and ask him any question. And you know what all of his questions came back to was, where are your weaknesses and where do you feel you need the most work in the most areas? And I'm like, holy shit. I asked him for a specific answer to a bench press question, and the first thing he's telling me is, where are your weaknesses? See, and I tell people this all the time, and they think I'm being an asshole. And I'm just like, no, no, no. You got to understand that getting better at something specific takes a general mindset. You got to, it's like medicine. You don't look at the specific problem. You look at how that problem occurred and then try to trace it back so that you're not putting Band-Aids on bullet holes, right?
Yes, yes.
So that's what I learned. And that was probably a mixture of that. And then I got to talk a lot with Verkhoshansky, which is considered the godfather of plyometrics. He invented plyometrics in the 40s and 50s, or at least got named to invent them. He was a track guy. And then when the Soviet Union fell apart, he became in charge of all of Olympic sports in Italy. Well, long story short, I had been posting articles on conjugate training, and his daughter had reached out to me and goes, hey, my father would like to talk to you, but he can't speak English, but I can. Can we go back and forth? And some of this conversation is still on the internet. It's under Verkhoshansky.com, but you'll see me talking as Matt Wenning. And we talk a lot about conjugate periodization. This was 12 years ago. And he's like, look, the system that we had originally designed was nothing like what you guys have, but I'm super interested in it because I think it's I think it's a hybrid, but it's almost a step up from what we were doing. Because here's the deal. He said back in the 50s and 60s when we were first designing conjugate, we didn't have all these different apparatuses. We only had straight bars, maybe a couple different small machines. But he said, now we have this huge influx of all this different material and equipment that we can use. And we're going to be, I want to see how you guys are implementing this. So we traded back and forth a lot of ideas. And he's the one that showed me those Polish jumping books and telling me that plyometrics can't be done more than 15 times in a workout.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. Well, so listen. I'm watching my timer here. We got 30 seconds left. So I'm going to wrap it up, but hang tight because I'm going to finish up with you on Zoom, okay?
Yep.
So first of all, I want to tell everybody, thank you very much for watching. And I want to say thank you very much to Matt Wenning. The knowledge bombs that this brother was dropping are freaking fantastic. And I'm going to have to, if he's okay with it, get him back because there is so much to learn. And you never want to be the smartest guy in the room. And certainly when he's here, I am not the smartest guy in the room, and I am learning a crap ton. So thank you very much. Hank, thank you, everybody. We'll see you on the next one.